It's good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy, back with Hometown Commander. We're back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I brew my version 1.0 deck list of the Commander in front of us on my quest to out-brew Magic World. And as always, the deck list will be down in the description for you for your viewing pleasure. Today we are continuing our Ravnica Remastered celebration, doing a commander for every guild. And today I thought I'd do a commander that I've never had the privilege of playing against, but certainly looks like a ton of fun. And that's Mazirek, Kraul Death Priest, a 5-mana 2/2 insect shaman with flying that says whenever a player sacrifices a permanent, we put a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control. Not a creature, a permanent. And I think that makes that more relevant because we do sacrifice a lot of things in Commander, right? Fetch lands, treasures, just to name a couple. But what I like about Mazirek is it gives us a really fun payoff for sacrificing. You know, traditionally when we think about sacrifice payoffs, we think about Aristocrats, right? Life loss for our opponents and life gain for us, which I think is still important in this deck. We still are doing enough Aristocrat things to make it relevant for us. But I think instead of just relying on the Aristocrat game plan, making our opponents lose enough life through things like Bastion Remembrance, gotta remember that when we're sacrificing things, we're putting counters on every creature we control, which means we may eventually just be able to make enough tokens and sacrifice enough things to not necessarily need to burn our opponents out with, those Aristocrat effects and just run them over, which is cool because I think it allows us to have a secondary plan of attack instead of just trying to get those sack fodders outlets down and just trying to get those Aristocrat effects down and just mining that for value. We have another way to win the game, and I think that matters because it's very easy to get a deck that just does one thing. And if you can't fire that one thing, it becomes tough to watch your deck do what it does. What I like here is if we never find a Bastion Remembrance effect, maybe we can put our board wide enough to really hurt our opponents or make Mazirek big enough just to win the game with commander damage. I mean, that's always a possibility. If someone doesn't have any flyers in their deck and doesn't have any removal, Mazirek could definitely threaten to end the game that way. So first we're going to talk about making tokens and the kind of Aristocrat side of the deck. Then really quick after that, we're going to talk about forcing our opponents to sacrifice things, which I think is important because if we can do that, that's great. And then we get value as well when they're sacrificing things. And then we'll do some playtesting. So first up, before I want to talk about tokens, I want to talk about the fact that we do have the ability to sacrifice our own things, right, for value. So we're going to be playing Promising Vein, Volatile Thought, Evolving Wilds, Fabled Passage, our fetch lands, lands that we could sacrifice to draw cards, Jund Panorama, Lotus Field, when it comes in, we sack 2 lands, and, things like Riveteer's Outlook that sacrifices itself and go gets into lands. These are lands that sacrifice themselves to get other things, but we get a Mazirek trigger every time we do it as long as Mazirek's out, and I think those are important to talk about. Because if we can get enough of them after Mazirek gets down, then we can really take advantage of the value. So I'm going to talk about first is generating tokens. Then we'll talk about ways to sacrifice the tokens because both of those are just as equally important and they matter. It's very hard to make a Golgari tokens deck that cares about sacrificing things and not put Chatterfang in. Chatterfang is a great commander in its own right. In fact, it's probably the single best green-black Aristocrats commander I've ever seen played at a commander table. It plus Pitiless Plunderer plus anything that makes your opponent lose life is infinite, and it's very tough to stop. We do have that in here, Pitiless Plunderer, and things like Blood Artist and other effects. So it is another way for us to win the game. It's a very good combo, and it will definitely hurt our opponents. But again, I want to talk about Chatterfang because it's a great commander in its own right, and it is here to help us. We have things like Herd Bailiff and Scurry Oak that whenever counters are put in them when we make tokens, and this is great because with them out, once we sacrifice a token, we know we'll automatically get one back because once Mazirek puts those counters on these two, we get them again. We need to be slightly careful that we don't start a loop. I don't think we can, that I can tell on any of the things that I did. I don't think that we are creating a loop where we're making tokens then putting counters on anything, so we should be able to avoid that potential infinite loop, but they're great because they make tokens when counters get put on them. We do have things like Corpjack's Menace and Winding Constrictor that affect the amount of tokens that goes on things, which is cool. We have Tendershoot Dryad to make a token on everybody's turn, which is pretty helpful because then we have things to block or things to use for our abilities. Mycoloth is a really fun card that makes a sapling for each counter on it at the start of our turn. And what's cool is it normally has Devour, so we can come in with counters on it. But with Mazerak out, Mycoloth is just going to make us more and more saplings on our turn, which is going to make it more and more things for us to sacrifice to hurt our opponents with. We have things like Pest Infestation, which can hurt our opponents, but it also makes tokens for us to utilize for our effects. As well as we get to play Bootlegger Stash, a card that actually was of course lamented when it first came out because of Corvold and what it can do in a deck like that. What I like about Mazirek is that our lands can tap for treasures, and then those treasures can be sacrificed for mana, and that allows us to get more Mazirek triggers. So Bootlegger Stash seems like a really cool time, because it gives us more things to sacrifice. We're playing the Skullspore Nexus so that if any of our non-token creatures die, we get tokens out of them dying that we can then utilize for our benefit. We are playing things like Revel in Riches, which can make treasures when our opponent's things die, which then we can sacrifice those treasures for mana, but also gives us an alternate win con if we have enough treasures on the start of our turn. But Pitiless Plunder is one of the big ones that can really help us take advantage of getting a ton of these triggers. It says whenever another creature you control dies, we create a treasure token. So if we sacrifice one of our tokens to do something, we get a treasure out of it. We also can really lean on something like Mirkwood Bats that says whenever we create or sacrifice a token, each opponent loses a life. So again, this starts down our aristocrat-y type of our tokens with things like Blood Artist. Whenever another creature dies, target player loses a life and we gain a life. We have that Bastard Remembrance doing a very similar thing, having our opponents lose life when we gain a life. Zillipore Cutthroat, whenever it or another creature we control dies, each opponent loses a life and we gain a life. Poison Tip Archer, whenever a creature dies, not even ours, anyone's creatures dies, each opponent loses a life. So again, we're starting to stack these effects that hurt our opponents whenever creatures die. And that's important because we don't just care about killing our creatures. Now we can kill our opponent's creatures as well, and they lose life for it. But let's get into our sacrifices. What can we do to sacrifice our creatures for benefit, or what are things we can do to help? Well, we have something like Carrion Feeder. We can sack a creature at any time to put a counter on it. This is cool because then we could sacrifice that creature at instant speed, and that's important because if someone threatens to wipe our board, or someone threatens to take out a particular creature and we don't want it to be exiled, or we want to get some value out of it, we could sacrifice it and still get all of our relevant effects to go off, even when that creature is being threatened. We have Canker Bloom, which can do a couple cool things. It can destroy a target artifact or enchantment, or we can just proliferate, adding more counters to things, which is pretty darn cool. Iridescent Hornbeetle says at the beginning of your end step, you make an insect for each counter you put on creatures this turn. I forgot about this, but this really helps in making more counters. We have something like Gerard, which would have been another great choice for a Golgari commander. He gets +1/+1 for each creature in our graveyard, and we can sacrifice another creature, and each opponent loses life equal to that creature's power. This is really cool if we have a ton of mana, because those tokens that are going to get counters on them and get bigger and bigger and bigger, we could sacrifice them to Gerard, right, to deal damage to our opponents. But the big suite of 3 cards that are really going to help us sacrifice our creatures are our 3 altars. We have Altar of Dementia, which we could sacrifice a creature to make an opponent mill cards equal to that creature's power, and this is really good with Mazerak because our tokens are going to get big. Ashnod's Altar, which allows us to sack a creature for double colorless mana, and Phyrexian Altar, sacrifice a creature for a mana of any color. These are our 3 cards that are going to help us really take advantage of sacrificing our tokens, not just to get those abilities to go off, but actually get benefit from them. We also have that Skull Clam to use on the 1/1s to draw cards as well. So as you can see, making tokens, sacrificing them, and actually both of our Planeswalkers kind of help us with it. Vraska, we can sack another permanent. If we do, we gain a life and draw a card. And then a -9, eventually, if we can get there, is whenever a creature we control deals damage to a player, that player loses the game. So that's one, kind of little alternate win con we have. But Liliana says whenever a creature we control dies, we draw a card. So here's another example of a payoff for us sacrificing our own creatures. But what I want to talk about is our -4, because it's going to get us into talking about forcing our opponents to sacrifice their creatures. So each player sacrifices 2 creatures on a -4, means that potentially up to 6 creatures could get sacrificed for our opponents, meaning that we could get up to 8 triggers of Mazerak just on that -4 activation. But we get into spells, and we can talk about some things we have access to here. Make an example. Each opponent separates the creatures they control into 2 piles. For each opponent, you choose a pile, and the opponent sacrifices all their creatures in their chosen pile. This could be a massive, big set of Mazirek triggers. Deadly Brew says each player sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. If you sacrifice a permanent this way, we can return another permanent card from our graveyard to our hand. Killing Wave's kind of a fun board wipe. For each creature, its controller sacrifices if they play X life, so we could pick an amount here and make our opponents forced to take a bunch of life or sacrifice their things. Rise of the Witch King. Each player sacrifices a creature. If we sacrifice a creature this way, we could return another permanent card from our graveyard to the battlefield. So that's even better than Deadly Brew because it comes back to the battlefield. Sheoldred's Edict, forcing our opponent to either sacrifice a non-token, creature token, or planeswalker, and that's everyone, so they're all going to have to do it. Soul Shatter. Each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker with the highest mana value among creatures and planeswalkers they control. So again, here are more examples where we're forcing them to do things. And then one of my favorites is Vonus Hunger, which just says each opponent sacrifices a creature. But if we have the City's Blessing, they sacrifice half the creatures they control rounded up, which could potentially decimate someone's board. And with Mazerak out, it's just going to greatly increase the power, right, of all of our creatures. So really, I'm not playing any overrun style effects. I'm not playing the Crater Hoofs. I'm not playing Overwhelming Stampede because I honestly don't think we're going to need it. I think if the deck gets running, we're just going to be able to really bowl over our opponents. We're playing things like Life's Legacy to draw some cards if one of our creatures gets big enough. But really, I honestly don't think we're going to need it. I think we're either going to Aristocrats or combo out the game before we need something like Crater Hoof. But if we need it, I think our board's just going to go wide enough that we're going to be really be able to do it. Jaheira's going to let all of our tokens tap for mana to help us cast these spells and do these things, which makes a big deal. And then Savra, another one of our options that we could have chosen for a Golgari commander, plays really well into that forced sacrifice because it says if whenever we sacrifice a black creature, we could pay 2 life. If we do, everybody else has to sacrifice. Or whenever you sacrifice a green creature, we can gain 2 life. And that's cool because we can get some life back or get some life to pay for that to force everyone to sacrifice. We are also playing things like Grave Pact, which is going to force everybody to sacrifice things and could potentially wipe an entire board just by us sacrificing our own things. A card that I really like that takes advantage of this for us is Retribution of the Ancients from Khans. Paying a black and removing X counters from among creatures we control can give a creature -X/-X until end of turn, allowing us to get rid of pesky creatures that way. And even something like an Evolutionary Leap can have us pay money to sacrifice a creature to reveal cards on the top of our library until we hit a creature and put it in our hand, allowing us to dig for more. I think this is a really nice list. For what it's trying to do. It'll never be Shatterfang. Shatterfang's just such a better combo Aristocrats commander. But I think this does hit pretty hard, and it's going to be pretty fun to go wide. So let's get over into our playtest. Mazirek is a 5-mana commander, so that's something to remember. We have 2 lands and a Farseek. I think that's great. This does exactly what we want to do. Turn 1, we will get down that command tower. Turn 2, we will get down that forest and go ahead and Farseek. And I think we'll go ahead and grab one of our dual lands since we have access to it. Here, we'll just get the Overgrown Tomb and bring it in tap. No reason to put it down untapped. Ain't going to do us any good to do that. Turn 4, we see a Liliana, which isn't too bad. We could Pest Infestation, but that certainly doesn't make any sense here. We could put down Cankerbloom, but we could put down Cankerbloom and the Retribution, but I don't see too much there. I kind of like just getting down Kadama here. Turn 4, we don't get a land like I was certainly hoping for, so I think we'll put down Cankerbloom and a Nest Shambler. Nest Shambler says whenever it dies, we make 1/1s equal to its power, so that's a great card to have. Turn 4, we see a Mosswort Bridge. We'll get that in tapped, and we get to exile the top 4 cards: Vraska, Forest, Bajukabog, Mycoloth. And when our power gets up to 10, we can play that for free by just tapping it for a green. I like the idea of Vraska because it draws us cards, but I also like Mycoloth because it can start making us tokens. I think I'll choose the Mycoloth, and the rest of these go on the bottom. So we'll just say bottom library. So Mycoloth will be our choice on the Mosswort Bridge, and maybe as soon as next turn we might be able to do that depending on what we get into. All right, we draw a Compy Storm. I don't hate the idea of going into Pest Infestation here. We do have the Sheoldred's Edict. We're still 1 mana away from We're still 1 mana away from Mazerak, which is where we really want to get to. I don't mind the Compy Storm. Beginning of our end step, if a creature died this turn, create a token that's a copy of Compy Storm. Here we could sacrifice Cankerbloom if there's something we wanted to remove. Let's say for the purposes of this game that there was something like a Soul Ring or a Signet. I would probably just Cankerbloom here and get rid of it. No, it doesn't really help us, but it does get us another copy of Compy Swarm, which isn't a bad idea. We'll untap for our next turn. Still not a land, damn it. We could Pest Invest for 1, but that doesn't make sense. We're at 3, 5, 7, 8 power. Man, this really sucks. I was kind of hoping we did another land. Let's rerun it again and see if we can get a hammer. We have more access to lands. Here we go. Here's a 5-lander. Perfect. We can get Mazirek pretty darn quickly. We will put in the Forest to start, I guess. Nothing we can do on turn 1. Turn 2, we have a couple pretty cool plays. We have access to Blood Artist. We have access to Diabolic Intent. Eventually, when we get some creatures down, we have access to Cankerbloom. Kind of like the Cankerbloom here. No point in running out the Blood Artist if we don't have to. Why get it put in harm's way? We don't need to. 3 mana here. I think we put down the Arcane Signet, and I guess I'll run out that Blood Artist, get it there, and get it ready to go. Turn 5, now we have room for Mazerak, and I think that's exactly what I'll do. Get Mazerak down here and get it ready to go for next turn. Nurturing Peatland there. So we need to sacrifice a permanent to get +1/+1 counters and everything, or we could just keep building our board. We could get the Doubling Season down. We could get the Bastion Remembrance down, which would make us a token. We could ideally Bastion and Diabolic Intent if we wanted to. That would put a counter on anything and get us a trigger. I think I would do that. Let's do that. We Diabolic Intent, sacrificing the soldier that we just got. Everybody loses one and we gain one. We pick somebody to lose one and we gain one, and we get a counter on everything. And let's go get, what do we want here? We have we don't have a sack outlet yet. We also don't have a way to make a ton of tokens yet. We do have the Michaeloth, which is going to start getting us tokens on each of our turns, which is pretty good. The question becomes, what would be the thing here that would seem really good? Man, Pitiless Blunder wouldn't be bad, making us treasures, getting us more activations. Kind of like the idea of Tender Shoot Dryad to get us more creature tokens, but Horn Beetle could also be pretty good, getting us access to tokens for each tokens for each +1/+1 counter we put on everything, which is pretty damn good as well. I like the idea of going for something like Mirkwood Bats to deal damage when we get tokens, or get things out on the battlefield. We don't have any removal, so I guess we could get something like Assassin's Trophy. I think for the purposes of not sitting here all day and looking through this deck, which would be fun to do, I'm gonna take a Sacrifice Outlet because I feel like we're gonna need it eventually. That's our turn. We did get a fun thing there, and no attacks yet. Turn, what's this, 5, 6, 7 mana. I love the idea of getting Michaeloth down here. So it has Devour, and if we Devour, it gets counters on it. I like the idea of losing the Cankerbloom here to it to give it counters. That'll give it another counter because of Mazirek, and we get 2 triggers here. No tokens this turn yet, because of course it just came down. That'd be 5. And I think we have to hold there, maybe take an attack with Mazirek in the air. This turn here, we see a Field of the Dead, which is pretty great. We get the Field of the Dead in tapped. Michaeloth just made us a ton of tokens. It would have been 3 tokens. So we play the Doubling Season, right? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think what we do is we alter and then play the Doubling Season by getting rid of a couple of these 1/1s, put more counters and everything, get a few more triggers of our life loss. Maybe we look to take another attack with those counters would be, well, let's see, when they come in, they wouldn't be doubled. When we sacrifice to play the Doubling Season, they wouldn't be doubled, but now if we sacrifice something, it would be doubled. But let's see. That was 3 to put down. We had 4 mana. We would only need to have sacrificed 1 of the 1/1s, so we would have 1 left to be able to take advantage of the Doubling Season. But we untapped the next turn. I believe Mike lost up to like 6 or 7 counters, so we're getting another bunch of 1/1s. We played this Evolutionary Leap. We could sack the 1/1s to get more creatures, and I think this is a great board state now. We have our Aristocrat effects, we have our ways to get more tokens, and now all we have to do is protect this, and Field of the Dead is going to start making us more tokens as soon as we get more lands. Well, let me know what you guys think of Mazirek down in the comment section below, and I will catch you guys next time.